So I think we can begin. Yes. Yes. So well, today we are enjoying our third meeting with Cecilia Pennacini. Well, and as you remember, Cecilia is not only professor in anthropology with the University of Turin, but also the director of the University Museum of Ethnography. And I guess that Cecilia's lecture today will deal more with her work in this capacity. And the title of the talk is Anthropological Museums and Their Present Challenges. And also Cecilia promised us a virtual tour of the exhibition Il Mondo in una stanza, the world inside the room. So Cecilia, you're most welcome, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri, and thank you to everybody. For me, in the last years, the museum that I'm directing has been probably the most important and time-consuming activity. So it gave me the possibility of think a lot about what we can consider the public space for anthropology, because museums are probably the most important public space where anthropological theories and findings can be shared with the large public. So I think they can play a very important role in our societies, but they are, generally speaking, in a crisis. There are many topics that raised in the last decades regarding anthropological museums that produce a big debate and engage the scholars who work inside the museum in facing this need of change. So let me open my PowerPoint and share it with you. No, sorry. No. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
You? I'm opening the presentation. Yes, so what I would like to do in this short presentation is to try to retrace some of the main important steps in the history of anthropological museums, so to try to understand the challenges, the present challenge they are now facing. And then I would like to tell you something about the history of the Museum of Anthropology and Ethnology of the University of Torino, which is a small institution, but the problems that we face are the same of the big institutions. So it give me a lot of ideas and problems to try to solve. So I would like to start telling that objects have always been at the center of the relationships between cultures. They have, and between different cultures, so objects have circulated since a very long time. Western societies started very early to collect souvenirs, objects from other worlds in various forms. During the Renaissance, here you see something that is related to my town, Torino, Turin. It became the capital of the Duchy of Savoy They were not kings at the time, they were dukes, but they shift the capitals to Turin. And Karl Emanuel I had already the idea of realizing what he called the Great Gallery, which was a library, first of all, but also a place where he, as a duke, wanted to recreate a sort of encyclopedia of the world, collecting all kinds of different things, vegetal and zoological specimena, objects, paints, books, and also exotic objects. And here in the picture, you can see two very, very ancient and precious African ivories, a spoon, and what it is called an oliphant. So it is a horn made for hunting. And these two ivories were produced by African artists in Sierra Leone and in present Nigeria on the demand of Portuguese merchants and travelers who gave to these artists some medieval books with images that the artists could copy. So as you can see, the pictures are small, but you can probably see the iconography reproducing this object is partly European, animals that the artists never seen in their life, and partly African. So these kind of objects became quite common in the royal court in Europe during the Renaissance and kept as exotic objects in the cabinet of curios, Wunderkammer, that princes and kings like Karl Emanuel I of Savoy wanted to have in their court, so to show their richness and their capacity to control the universe somehow. These are objects very interesting under the point of view of the history of African art, because they belong to a period before slavery, when the European, the Portuguese, who arrived on the coast of West Africa, still they did not despise Africans. They recognized their ability to make art objects. So they are very interesting. A good number of these ivories are kept in Italian museum, as well as in every museum of the world. Even in St. Petersburg, there are some. So Wunderkammer, the curios cabinet, were probably the first way to keep the first model of museum where we can find this kind of exotic objects. They kept objects categorized in different categories: naturalia, artificialia, scientifica, exotica. So they were kept without any scientific organization, but showing the taste of European aristocracy for objects coming from different worlds. And in this period, we are still in quite an ancient period. Museums realized on the model of the Kunstkammer, of the cabinet of curiosities, born in different parts of Europe. You can see on the left the Kierkelian Museum in Rome, realized by the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher in 1651 at the Collegio Romano. Then this collection developed in what it is now the Ethnological Museum in the Vatican. And on the right, you can see the Kunstkamera in St. Petersburg. That is one of the oldest ethnographic museums in the world. Even there, it consists in objects collected in the huge Russian Empire through the cultural diversity in a very old period, 1727, that then developed in the Ethnological Museum. But from the model of the Kunstkamera, of the Cabinet of Curios, during 19th century, a new approach started, and it started when anthropology as a scientific discipline developed inside the academy. But we also know that anthropology around in the second half of the 19th century, born in the museums before that, than in the universities. Or anyway, there were a strict relationship between universities where anthropology started to develop and the ethnological museums. So this is a new model where scientific way of collecting and especially of exhibiting objects started. Here you can see quite a very impressive example is the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, founded in 1884. It is very interesting because it is still like that. So if you go to Oxford, please go to visit it. It kept the old organization of the objects. And this organization is called the typological exhibition of objects, meaning that objects were organized in showcases, as you can see, filled with an incredible huge amount of objects of the same type. For example, pottery, you can see here potteries or musical instruments or dresses, decorations, knives, weapons, anything you can imagine, put together, even if they were coming from very different parts of the world. So the idea was to, and it is still now, to give the opportunity of making a comparison of objects of the same type coming from different cultural context. Of course, this presentation makes some problems for us because the typological organization suggests, and this was the theoretical framework of the time, suggests an evolutionary framework where the public can grasp the idea that culture evolve from a primitive, simple stage towards civilization. So it was an evolutionary framework that put the different society in a primitive state in the eye of the public. And for this reason, this kind of exhibition, it became critical and was at the center of, was being criticized quite not in a very long time ago. So the development of anthropological theories also was based on a principle that was quite important in the second half of the 19th century, and that is that anthropology, without any specification, was part of natural sciences. So anthropology included physical anthropology, the biological study of human beings, and cultural anthropology. And the connection between these two aspects, it has been very, very close since quite a recent time. So another big change from the model of the curious cabinet to the scientific anthropological museum was to put together anthropological specimena, so finds, and cultural, ethnographic, even artworks objects. And this is the main principle that moved the founder of Musée de l'Homme, Museum of Mankind in Paris, Henri Rivière, that you can see in this picture, when he decided to transform the Musée Ethnographique du Torcadero, so the old ethnographic museum that was hosted in the Torcadero Palace, containing many of the objects of the cabinet of curios of the previous period. In 1937, Henri Rivière decided to transform this museum using a new model, which was the model of an inclusive approach to scientific and cultural anthropology. So here you can see a quotation of Rivière. I summarize it. He says that he wanted to approach the human beings under its multiple aspects and put these different aspects in the same place, so collect in a big synthetic way the results of the research of different and interdisciplinary specialists, so to oblige scholars to compare their conclusions and to work together, because humanity is a not separable whole, not only in the space, but also in time. So the idea of a very holistic approach to the study of humanity, and the idea of a museum containing all these different approaches. And this is the characteristic of the most part of anthropological museums born at the beginning of the 20th centuries. They normally put together physical anthropology and cultural anthropology in a perspective of natural sciences. But this approach, of course, became very difficult to maintain for many reasons, because Musée de l'Homme was also made on the basis of a big number of objects coming from the French colonies, the French colonial empire, especially through expeditions, scientific expedition. Probably you remember the expedition led by Marcel Griol in the 30s from Dakar to Djibouti, where he collected a huge number of objects for the Musée de l'Homme in some controversial ways. And we have this very interesting book written by Michel Léry, L'Afrique fantôme, the Phantom Africa, where he described the somehow violent, brutal way to acquire these objects. So in the 19th, the idea of a museum putting together physical and cultural anthropology, showing colonial objects in that way, became unacceptable. And a new project was made by Jacques Chirac and by Jacques Kershash, who was a very famous primitive art merchant in Paris, to realize a new different museum separating the biological collection from the cultural collection. And this is probably one of the most important challenges even today for many museums, the need to separate the biological dimension from the cultural one. You will see it also in our small museum in Torino. So in Paris, they did this separation. They left the biological collection at the Musée de l'Homme, and they put together the ethnographic and art object from the Musée de l'Homme and the Musée d'Afrique et d'Océanie, African and Oceanian art, and created this huge exhibition in a very beautiful building planned by artist Jean Nouvel, which costed 230 millions of euros. But Musée du Quai Branly was also a quite controversial enterprise. First of all, as you can see, they could not find the name for the museum because the idea of Kershash was to call it Musée des Arts Premiers, Museum of Primeval Arts, but the scholars, the anthropologists in France, and not only in France, refused this idea, but they could not find one name. And the difficulty of finding the names of the new anthropological museums, I think, is quite meaningful because it shows the crisis where we are. So the name of the museum remained Musée du Quai Branly. And still it is under the fire of attack. Just a few years ago, some Africans activists went inside the museum to try to stole some objects, claiming, probably right, and they were right, that they have been stolen by Africa during the colonial period. But Quai Branly is not the only one museum that needed a big renovation. Another one which was recently completely renovated is the Musée Royal de l'Afrique Centrale in Belgium, Tervuren, which now is called Africa Museum. The Musée Royal de l'Afrique Centrale had been found at the end of the 19th century, in 1897, when the Universal Exhibition in Tervuren was inaugurated, and it hosted thousands and thousands of art objects from the Congo, especially from the Congo. In an exhibition, you can see the picture here in black and white, which was very, very primitivist, and it was a propaganda discourse used to show the need of the European civilization of Africa, so emphasizing the savage state of African culture, so to call for the civilization, and through the civilization, the colonization. So clearly this museum discourse became unacceptable, even because after independence, a huge wave of migration from the Congo invested Belgium, and all these African communities living nowadays in Brussels and in Belgium claimed a new discourse on Africa. So the renovation was really needed, and they reopened, I think, 2 years ago. But even there, the renovation was under a big public debate, and many still feel discomfort towards this exhibition. So, and the last probably example of this big need of renovation of Anthropological Ethnographic Museum is the Humboldt Forum in Berlin. It has been inaugurated, I think, in September, so 1 month ago. It is a huge imperial building in the center of Berlin, where there are different exhibitions, but mainly, as you see at the second and third floor, it hosts the Ethnological Museum that was hosted in another building founded by Adolf Bastian in 1886, including objects from the Kunstkamera of the previous period and the Museum of Asian Art as well. It was inaugurated in September 21 with a keynote speech made by the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, titled Colonialism and Coloniality. So this topic of the colonial origin of the collection, it is at the center of this renovation, but still they went through a big public debate, a lot of critiques, even if they are trying to offer this place, as you can see in the slide, as a place for culture and science, for exchange and debate. But not easy to find a consensus among the people. So the last debate of the most recent years is that not only of the need of a renovation of the anthropological exhibition, but also it is connected with the origin of the collections. It focuses on the often violent and brutal means through which the objects were acquired. Maybe somebody has read the very interesting book by British archaeologist Dan Hicks called The Brutish Museum, focusing especially on one, probably the most significant episode of this story, that it is the punitive expedition of 1897, when the British peeled the bronze of Benin, destroying the capital of this very important African kingdom, and dispersed the objects, this wonderful, incredible art masterpiece of Benin kingdom, in different Western museum and private collections. So this is probably the most clear example of a violent way of creating anthropological connection. Of course, not all the objects were stolen. Many of them were acquired, but sometimes they were acquired, bought in an unfair purchase because of the colonial situation. Many were acquired in a completely legal way. So the situation is very complex. But just to quote maybe the last point before going to our museum in Torino, this problem of the restitution has been clearly defined and recognized in 2017 by French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron gave a speech in Ouagadougou at the time, granting that France should engage in the process of restitution of some of its African masterpiece, knowing that probably 90% of the treasures of African heritage is not on the African continent. So Macron commissioned a report to the French art historian Bénédicte Savoy and to the Senegalese economist Felwine Sarr, where they analyzed the problem and declaring that this process of restitution should start. It is a very difficult process, even because the law, the French law, as the Italian law, forbid to alienate the heritage which is kept in public institution or museum, but we start to think about this. So let's come now to our small Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography of the University of Torino. It is hosted in this ancient building, which is just in front of the Valentino Park, the place where the Universal Exhibition were held in Torino. It is there together with other 3 museums, all belonging to this positivistic period of the end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, the Museum of Anatomy, the Anatomic Museum, the Criminal Anthropology Museum, created by Cesare Lombroso, a quite famous scholar who was in Torino at the time, the Scientific and Technological Archive of the University, and the Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography. The museum was founded in 1926 by Giovanni Marro. You can see him in this beautiful picture. Giovanni Marro was a psychiatrist. He was a medical doctor in his education, but as it was common at the time, he was a very eclectic scholar. His father was a good friend of Cesare Lombroso and had been the director of the psychiatric hospital in Torino. And Giovanni Marro has been the first anthropologist teaching anthropology in the University of Torino. Of course, it was general anthropology, physical anthropology, that was anthropology, and ethnography, but he had also some other interest. He was a member of, the archaeological mission in Egypt, the Italian archaeological mission in Egypt, directed by Ernesto Schiaparelli, who was the director of the Egyptian Museum. You know that in Torino we have the second most important Egyptian museum in the world after Cairo, so it's a very, very big museum. And Marro used to go to Egypt to do research together with Schiaparelli, so that we have quite a big Egyptian collection in our museum. He also collected some objects made by patients of the mental hospital, art objects that today we consider some of the first example of art brut, informal art, which are quite interesting. He made an interesting photographic archive, and then he collected mainly through donations, objects from Africa, America, Asia, Oceania, and Europe. And here I would like to show you some samples of our collections. This is one of these incredible objects made by patients of the mental hospital. It is a big sculpture made by animal bones, chicken bones, that this patient realized in many, many years and is a sort of universe, a projection of his mind. And also these are strange dresses made by these psychiatrist patients. So we have a big collection in physical anthropology. You can see mainly from Egypt, mummies, some 30 mummies and 80 mummified skulls, like the one you can see on the left, and something like 700 complete skeletons from Egypt, taken in Italy through the excavation work of the archaeological mission, and then kept for study reason. They are a sort of biological archive in our museum. Then the ethnographic collection. The ethnographic collection are quite wide. We have objects from different parts of the world acquired through donations from explorers, travelers, technicians, missionaries, soldiers who went to Africa. You know that Italians traveled a lot. So apart from the Italian colonial area, so Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Libya, Italians went, for example, a lot in the Congo, because as you remember, probably the first colonization of Congo under Leopold II was made through an international association, and Italy was part of this association. And for example, you can see here the picture of this engineer, Carlo Sesti, who went to Congo, spent 20 years there to plan the railway between Leopoldville, Kinshasa today, to the east part of the Congo to improve the traveling and the export of goods. And in this capacity, he also collected objects and then gave the objects to the museum. So we have quite an interesting collection of objects from the Congo. You can see here a Mangbetu sculpture, some Kuba velvets, and the Congo statue of an ancestor. We have objects from Oceania. So, and then from America, from Asia, and from Europe. So how these objects were exhibited in the museum? The museum opened in 1926. I should mention the fact that Mauro, the founder, was a very convinced fascist. He was a member of the fascist party from the first hours. And we can say he was his theories, his anthropological theories, were based on a racist view of humanity. So the exhibition, as you can see in these old photos, put together objects from different parts of the world, human and animals anthropological remains in a sort of framework thought to show, to demonstrate a hierarchical organization of different cultures and society in humanity, from a primitive one to the most civilized one. And for Mauro, ancient Egypt, Greek, ancient Greece, and Roman Empire were at the top of civilization, while Africans, Oceania, indigenous America, they were really at the bottom. So the exhibition framework was meant to demonstrate this evolutionary organization. The exhibition, of course, changed during time, but it emphasized this racial framework. Here you can see, I'm sorry, it is a bad picture, but you can see a photo of a hall planned and realized by Maro in 1938, La Sala della Razza, the Hall of Race, in an exhibition called Turin and Autarky. We were really in the middle of the colonial campaign, Italian colonial campaign, and Maro signed the Manifest of the Races. That was the document that some scholars produced to sustain, to support the promulgation of racist law in Italy, the racial law that expel Jews from the schools, from the public administration, university, and also forbid any racial union in Italy, but also in the empire in Africa. So Maro was very much a supporter of these theories, and you can see this perspective in the museum, in the way he collected and in the way he exhibited the objects. This is a showcase of the fetishes of the Congo. Then what happened? After the Second World War, Maro was purged by the university because of his participation in the Fascist Party. And then few years after, he retired and he died. His assistant, Sabina Fumagalli, took the direction, and then other directors, but always physical anthropology, because the museum was kept inside the biological department, the Department of Biology, and traditionally they continue somehow this tradition. So I took the direction in 2017, and I'm the first cultural anthropologist directing the museum. So what I tried to do in these years, and then we'll briefly arrive to the recent exhibition. First of all, I should say the museum is not open, is closed, because not only because COVID, but also because of the security norms that forbid us to open to the public. So I try to, on one hand, to reorganize the collection, cataloging them under a cultural perspective, and on the other hand, to organize some temporary exhibition with a completely new approach. And this approach is based on the participation of the people living in our territory. And you should know that Piedmont is a very multicultural society at the moment. We have something like 18% of the population of stranger origins. So there is a big need of knowing more about the culture of origin of these communities in order to try to avoid the risk of racism and xenophobia, which are always there. So the first exhibition we organized was around this Gele de mask from Nigeria and Benin we have in our collection. A beautiful mask used in some women rituals. So the title of the exhibition is Gele de le nostre madri Yoruba, our Yoruba mothers. And to do this small exhibition, as you can see inside the university, we involved the Yoruba community in Torino. We realized some video interviews that are on our website. If you want, you can go and see them. They are in English, where these Yoruba women especially gave us their knowledge about the ritual, about what does it mean to be a woman in Yoruba community, in Yoruba culture, etc. And each mask had the QR code under the showcase, so the public could go on the website and see the interviews. And then we organized several seminars and conferences with the Yoruba community, and I think somehow it was a success to bring them inside the university, make them meeting the students and have really an exchange. The second exhibition I worked on was organized at the Egyptian Museum to show one of our mummy. You can see it here, which underwent a restoration, very costly restoration. But we took this opportunity to tell the story of our museum. And since we were at the Egyptian Museum, we decided to involve university students of Afro descent to discuss with them the Orientalist approach of Egyptology. So these students, even here we made the video, these students try to reflect on what is Egyptology, what is Orientalism, and how it is possible for them to reappropriate Egypt, ancient Egypt, in an Afrocentric perspective. And so even in this exhibition, we tried, as you see, to use a participatory approach. And now we come to the last example, and then I'm not sure I will be able really to do a virtual tour, but I would like to show you this exhibition, which is on now, as you can see. The World in a Room, Il Mondo in una Stanza. The title recalled the idea of the Cabinet of Curios. It showed another time a choice of objects from our museum, but as you can see, it has been made in collaboration with the Dominican Republic Minister of Culture. And here I should tell you the story of this exhibition. The idea came because 1 year ago, September 20, I received the phone call from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs telling me that the Dominican Republic wrote a formal request to the Italian ambassador at UNESCO in Paris in order to ask the possibility of negotiating the restitution of what is our most precious object, the cotton semi. What is the cotton semi? The semi, maybe some of you know, these very precious objects are sacred object of the Taino. The Taino were the indigenous of the Caribbean island when Columbus arrived there at the end of the 15th century. And the Taino of what is now the Dominican Republic in Haiti, and at the time inhabited the island that Columbus called, baptized Hispaniola, disappeared in approximately 40, 50 years. So they had this sacred object called semi, made in different forms, in wood, in cotton, like this one, but many of these objects went destroyed by the violence and by the missionaries who went there to evangelize the people, but some were taken to Europe as gifts for the nobles, for the priest, the archbishop, to be kept in the curious cabinet. We have two semi in our collection. One is wooden and is this one, but the other one, the cotton one, is a very particular object because it contains a human skull, a deformated human skull, because the Taino practiced the deformation of the skull as a sign, as an aesthetic trait, and probably an identity traits. Somehow it is a human beings. Probably the skull was the one of a cacique, of a king. And these objects, the semi, were used in rituals made by specialists called behike, who inhalated a substance called kohoba. So they were somehow possessed by the spirit of the semi, and they spoke for them. The cotton semi is the only one semi of this type which remained in the world. And that's why the Dominican Republic decided to ask for it to return in the island. So what happened? We started a very complex, long process to find the field of collaboration with them. And through the Dominican ambassador in Italy and the Italian ambassador in the Dominican Republic, we started this collaboration that resulted in the exhibition. And the exhibition tried to tell us the story of the semi and of the Tainos, so to reconstruct the biography of the objects. So it tells us something about Columbus and especially of the practices regarding the semi. In Italy, we have other semis. In Rome, as you see, another very famous cotton semi, but it is not pre-Columbian. It contains some materials which show that has been made after the arrival of Columbus. Mainly, there is a piece of an African rhinoceros that show that it was made when the African slavery already invested the island. And these other objects from the Museo Nazionale, National Museum of Anthropology in Florence. We also put in the exhibition the first edition of the book of Fernando Colombo, the son of Christopher, where he tells the history of the Admiral Colombo, and that contain the description of this friar, Ramon Panet, who spent 2 years among the Taino learning his language, and he described the practice of the semi. So we try to reconstruct the original meaning in the context, and then also how these objects arrived in Torino, because this is the big question. We know that these two semi travel together. There are some evidences, these articles by American anthropologist Fuchs, published on the American Anthropologist in 1891. And then we know that an Italian merchant from Genoa, Giovan Battista Cambiaso, who went to Santo Domingo at the middle of 19th century and became a hero there, founding the Dominican Navy, and then he became the first consul of the Savoy kingdoms and then of Italy in the Repubblica Dominicana, sometimes acquired the two semi, and before 1902 sent them in Italy. And his son, Rodolfo Domingo Cambiaso, was also an archaeologist, an historian of art, who collected objects from the Taino and sold them to the Smithsonian Institution. So we found some documents of the Smithsonian Institution that made us in the position of proving that the objects were not stolen, were bought by Cambiaso, and so not underwent an illicit exportation. Here, I don't think we have the time, but maybe you can go on the website of La Venaria to see the ambient where the exhibition is held. Is a beautiful, wonderful palace of the royals of the Savoy dynasty near Torino, where they gave us the possibility of organizing the exhibition. So in this wonderful ambience, in one room, we show the two semi with the contextualization of the Taino. Then in a second, and here you can see the book of Colombo and some explication of the story of the Tainos and of the object. A second section is on the Bororo of Mato Grosso. We have quite a big collection of feeders decoration that we have recently restored of the Bororo. And the third section on Congo, telling the story of this African collection and of the Italian travelers who gave it to the museum. So this is the small exhibition. It's not a virtual tour, but I think if you want, you can go to the website. I would like to end telling that for me, the practice of or curating exhibition and thinking about the museum gave me a very challenging occasion to think about what anthropology can do in our globalized society, in our multicultural society. And in my opinion, the claim for restitution must be taken very seriously. And if the objects that have really been stolen should not be in our museum, but at the same time, it is very important and probably very more useful to launch international cooperation projects that help us to study and valorize this collection that we have in all the Western Europe, together with the nations, the states where these objects originated. And this collaboration now can be held, making the object circulating through temporary exhibition, but also thanks to digital possibilities, because now museum must use the digital revolution on the scientific point of view to share in platforms knowledge about collection, but also through all the possibility, the spectacular possibility of the digital network to really share this knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chile, for such a nice talk, which combined, well, in my view, deep observations on the history of ethnographic museums, well, and the current challenges to ethnographic museum as an institution. On the one hand, and on the other hand, it was really a great pleasure to visit your museum, at least virtually. Well, probably I hope that sooner or later we'll be able to visit it in person, as well as we will be able to visit camera in St. Petersburg. So, well, thank you very much once again. And so, dear colleagues, so the floor is open for questions, comments, whatever. You're most welcome.
May I ask you some questions?
Yes, of course.
So thank you very much. I was really excited about your presentation and all the museums that you have mentioned. And I want to ask you about following. So you have mentioned the museums in Rome, in Paris, in Oxford, in Belgium, and in St. Petersburg. Could you tell us, this is the biggest museums, and is there any other interesting, by your opinion, museums in Europe?
Yes, Maria, thank you for the question. I have chosen few examples of museums which underwent a process of renovation. That's why I did not mention the British Museum, because you know the British Museum is quite conservative. And of course they underwent renovations, but for what regard the anthropological collection, I don't think they really addressed the new challenges. While in Paris they worked a lot, in Belgium they tried, and of course I think the British Museum will also have to do something sometimes, and I think that this issue of restitution will increase in the next years, and the museum cannot, they can do nothing, they must do something. And so we will see, but it is true that the British Museum, apart from anthropology, they have bigger problems like the Parthenon's piece that they have in London, and all kinds of objects coming from all around the world. If you read the British Museum, the book from Dan Hirst, you understand to which extent our most prestigious museums are built on heritage that come from outside. So it is interesting to see what the museum are trying to do. And I think, of course, something must be done. And it is a question for everybody. What should we do? What do we have to do?
Yes, thank you. And one more question about that. As by your opinion, what is the best way of this renovation that should be done? What museums can do to improve?
It's not easy. I mean, it is not only a theoretical problem, because we can have a lot of theories, but then museums are quite practical institution where you should work for the public, meet the public interest, find a way to teach something to different publics, children, young, strangers, tourists. Tourists go to the museum. So it's not only a matter of theories, anthropological theory, it's a matter of curatorial practices, which is very, very challenging. So I don't know what we should do. I think, in my opinion, we have to try to set some cooperation projects with the nations from where the objects come from. Because the time is finished when you go to the museum and you just admire objects without knowing anything about the world where they come from. And this world now is so interconnected. So I think we need to work in a much more cooperative international framework. But this needs a lot of funds, a lot of energy, and it's not so easy. So, for example, with the Dominican Republic, we tried, but I've been working for all the year on this project, and it's not easy, but I think it is the only way. And for Africa, with Africa is even more difficult because it's not so easy to find institutions that are ready to collaborate in Africa. In Uganda, there is a museum, we collaborate, but we must try to improve this collaboration. This, I think, can be the way, and not, I mean, we should go out from, we should try to overcome a conflict perspective, responsibility and restitution. They are there, but it's better for everybody to see it in a positive way and carry out shared projects. That's my opinion.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And may I add some?
Yes,
I was really excited about how modern, in the best mean of this word, how modern looks the museum of your university. It's really good. I have been visited just 2 or 3 museums in Moscow that was so modern in this mean. Modern, like modern way of presentation.
Yes, unfortunately, it's not a museum. They are just a temporary exhibition. That's the problem. But now we are trying to work to have a permanent exhibition.
Yes, good luck.
Yes,
Yes.
it's hard.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
May I ask a question? Hi, my name is Aleftina, and I'm also acting as an independent curator. So I'm really grateful for your thoughts today. I'm also publishing now a paper on new approaches to representation of cultures in anthropological museums. And in this paper, I have regarded Weltmuseum in Wien. And I would like to ask you if you managed to visit it before all these events, and have you seen how they rearranged the old Habsburg's collection, imperial collection of ethnographical exhibits, and what do you think of their thematic zones, if you of course know what they have done?
No, I visited the Wien Museum, but I think before the renovation. So unfortunately, I'm not aware of how they are working now. So I can't say anything about that.
It was a European Museum Forum in 2019, and that's where I met this museum. Like the director of the museum was presenting, and they won the Kenneth Hudson Prize for this renovation that they have managed to do in 2017. So it is exactly what they did. They have rearranged the halls so that they are not dedicated to one culture, but to one problem. For example, it's not Japan, but it's the problem of opening Japan and how it has affected European culture and so on. So each hall is a problem now. And I think it is, for me, it is a very example how we should think, in which direction we should think when we have funds to rearrange our old museums into new ones.
Yeah, thematic exhibition, I think, are a very good way to use objects to look to problems, to bigger topics. And another aspect that we didn't touch, but I think it's interesting, is the work of contemporary artists. There are very interesting projects made by contemporary African artists, for example, that reread the old collection. I saw something in Zurich last year. They invited 5 or 6 artists from Congo, and they reread the stuff from the 19th, 20th century, giving their own perspective.
Like interpretation, yeah. So like they take old objects and they make new art objects based on the old ones. Yeah, cool.
This I think is very important. It is what I would like to do. I think at least some part of the museum should be a space for contemporary artists to tell their stories as well, so that you can see that you have different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to ask questions or to make comments? Otherwise, I can do some. I can make some comments. Well, actually, I have a number of comments and maybe questions, but probably I would like to concentrate on a couple of them. One on renovation and another on restitution. Actually, those were probably the most important points in your talk. As for restitution first, I think that there are two kinds of restitution possible, and they may be different in their consequences. The first one is when some pieces of art or any other objects of culture are moved from a museum in one country to a museum in another country. For example, well, my colleagues from the Republic of Benin are waiting for restitution of the treasures of their cultures from France after Macron's announcing that the objects of culture would be restituted, and they are looking forward to hosting them at their National Museum in Cotonou. This is one point. At this point, we can discuss what can be the final outcome of that, because now we're talking about restitution from former colonial powers to former colonies. But for example, well, there can be discussions in the same logic, within the same logic that, for example, some treasures of Italian culture are still in France after Napoleon's invasions, yes, in Louvre. Why Italy cannot claim for these culture objects? And then if we follow this logic, and the whole world follows this logic, well, all the cultural treasures will return to their home countries, and that would be something like nonsense, except something bought officially or like that. So, but there is another kind of restitution. I don't know if it is called restitution, but at least another kind of another way of culture objects leaving museums. When for some people they are culture objects and museum objects, and for people from the cultures from which these objects come, they are still well, objects of their living cultures. For example, I remember once I was at Peabody Museum in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, and the colleague who was accompanying me at the museum said to me, "Look at this Dakota Indians, well, skin, painted skin, buffalo skin. It is here for the last day. Tomorrow we will return it to the Dakota Nation, as they call it, them nations. Well, because for them this is a sacred object." And even in Russia, so we have some examples of that kind, when old icons, Orthodox Christian icons, which are of immense historical and artistic and cultural value, are removed from museums to churches, like that. And at this point, well, we lose these objects as museum objects at all, and they stop serving actually, well, if you like, the humankind. They return, they begin to serve just practical purposes of a local culture or a specific culture only. So what should or can be done, or nothing should be done with all this from your perspective, in your view? This is my first observation, question. I don't know, maybe I should well, speculate on the second point too before you comment. For me, not just to take the word, to take the floor too often. So, and as for renovation, well, what do you think of the experience, for example, of the museum, the Royal Museum in Tervuren in Belgium? Probably you know what they did, right? They actually destroyed the initial exposition, and then they, I am telling to those who do not know that, this is the museum of actually of the art of former Belgian colonies in Africa, mostly. A huge museum. Well, and maybe 3 years ago, 4 years, so not long ago, they, as I said, renovated the exposition completely. And what they did, they gathered several, 8 if I'm not mistaken, Congolese intellectuals now residing in Belgium. Well, and they discussed among themselves and told actually the museum workers how to organize the exhibition, how in order it to represent the local, the Africans' views on what is exhibited, and not the views of the Europeans, the colonizers, and so on and so forth. So there is an interesting film on how all that was going on. Well, so, and my question is, do you think it's a proper way for renovating other museums of that sort? And how to combine or not to combine, well, the idea of showing culture objects from the position of the respective cultures with the standard well, basic principles of museum exhibiting. Thank you.
It is another conference, Dimitri. Yes, the first, your first observation. I think it is very important when you observe that these objects that we put in museums, they come from a living context, and it is not obvious that they should stay in a museum, except maybe for the objects belonging to cultures which disappeared, as the Taino. The Taino are not there anymore, so even the restitution is very controversial because the Taino disappeared. So the Dominican, they are the heir of the Spanish who killed the Tainos, and now they want back the. So it's very, very complex. But here, for me, maybe we should reflect on the different conception of heritage, because what I know from Africa is that they have a different conception of heritage. Heritage, that means what you received from the ancestor and you want to leave for further generation. Normally is a spiritual heritage, is not containing objects or spaces. So museum and heritage in a Western perspective is quite far away from African thinking, and probably is, as you say, objects, they were sacred objects used in practices And in Kampala, for example, in the Uganda Museum, they have some sacred objects, and there are mediums who goes in the museum early morning, 7 o'clock, and they get into a trance when they are in front of the showcase. And the director leave them doing this because the objects are charged. They were not supposed to be in a museum. This is right. So when I think UNESCO somehow destroyed this diversity in the conception of heritage, and when we work in museum, we must be aware of this. And maybe some objects should go back in the real context if it is necessary and be used in rituals. Why not? So about restitution, you know that for the law, there is a convention, UNESCO Convention of 1970, forbidding the illegal circulation of art objects. So everything happened before 1970 cannot be claimed except if it is some identity object, because there no law can, but must be very strongly claimed as a very strong identity object. What I think that art objects are made to circulate even outside their culture. This is part of the aesthetic value of an object. If an object has an important aesthetic value, it should be free to circulate. We cannot stop this circulation. For me, we should better speak about circulation than restitution. The object should be free to circulate. Of course, we cannot keep them in Europe. We should try to support this possibility to circulate, but the issue of private property of cultural objects it's quite controversial as well. So I think that normally this restitution campaign are very political. They are made for political reasons that have not so much to do with the history of the objects, the biography of the object, the scientific value and the meaning of the object. They are made for different reasons. I saw it very well in the Dominican Republic. When they claimed the object, it was because they had a political campaign, and the politician, they jump on this kind of, because it's very easy, it's an easy discourse. Then when you go to study the object, you see that it's so complex. It was not stolen. So it's you cannot simplify in this way. So I think we should be not too ideological when we speak about restitution. But there are cases like the Benin bronze, they need to be restituted, of course. But as you say, then they will go in a museum. So maybe for the community, it will be still outside their daily life. And about Tervuren, yes, I've not visited the new museum. Unfortunately, I would like to go. I've not seen it. I saw the film. As far as I understood, it was still very controversial. So they tried to involve the African intellectual. Here you have a big problem because, yes, we say we want to involve the Africans, the communities, but then who? And who specifically has the competencies? Because it's not because you are an African that you know about, automatically you know about the history of a culture. It's not true. So yes, we should find probably intellectuals like artists or scholars from Africa that know something and want to say something, but still there, I think it should be a cooperative process. because maybe these objects are in Europe since 150 years. It is important to remember how they came here, to tell the story of the acquisition of colonies. We cannot cancel this. I think it's part of the history of the object. So it's important to show the entire biography of the objects, even on the European side. So it's a matter of working together for me, very much. I don't know if I gave you some ideas.
Well, thank you very much for your observations. You know what I see as a kind of, I shall say, a threat, even not a challenge under the current circumstances.
Yes, yes.
Of course, we know that a huge part of what we call ethnographic objects, what is kept at ethnographic museums in Europe, in America, well, is what was moved from Africa, the Americas, whatever, well, violently. And the story of the Benin Roses is probably one of the most vivid examples of that. So, well, I know it very well because all my dissertations were on the Kingdom of Benin.
Ah, so
yeah, so, well, and I was in Benin City, of course. Well, and, but at the same time, although violently organized, well, this in many respects, to a considerable degree, these collections, this is that way connected the world, I should say. They connected the world. And I'm afraid that one of the threats our present day world is facing is fragmentation, defragmentation. It's turning into pieces nowadays. And from this perspective, it seems to me that it may be very symptomatic what we are seeing, well, the situation with the museums, with restitution, and so on and so forth. And it is a kind of a deadlock. To be honest, I'm sure none of us can answer definitely how to, well, satisfy the demands, and in many cases, well, legal demands and expectations of those peoples whose objects of culture are kept in museums now outside their home countries, on the one hand. And on the other hand, how to preserve museums as an institution of world culture as such. Well, we can trace how museums really as an institution were appearing in, and this is what you did, well, in the first part of your talk, how, well, the cabinets of curiosity transformed into museums and so on and so forth. So, and this is one of the most, in its nature, it's one of the most humanistic institutions we have. Well, and it's a great achievement of the human cultures that we have museums. So, and how, and what I want to say, nobody knows really how to keep the museum as an institution, go on functioning and playing its also educational role. You know that many museums, well, pursue educational purposes, first of all, and in many modern museums, they use, well, specific, most modern, well, equipment, technical equipment to attract junior visitors and so forth. Yes, on the one hand, and on the other hand, yes, how to satisfy the demands of those peoples from the still global periphery, I shall say.
I completely agree with you, Dimitri. I wouldn't like to live in a world where everybody keep their own things at home. Which kind of world is it? It's not. At the same time, it is true that museums are ancient humanistic institutions devoted to knowledge, as you say, but at the same time, nowadays, they are also at the center of the tourist industry. And I'm speaking from a country where tourism is the most important industry producing income in Italy. And I'm aware that when the Dominican Republic, they ask for the restitution of the semi, is because the semi in the Museo dell'Ombre Dominicano can produce some income because it is attractive, you see. So there are many different challenges, threats, as you say. The British Museum, it is a wonderful humanistic institution. At the same time, I think they should try to share more because it is there in London, and we should make an effort to share more.
And probably the British Museum is the best example of that dualism of the situation is with museums nowadays, what we were talking about, because on the one hand, as we said, it's a very humanistic institution, well, and one of the most prominent museums in the world. On the other hand, we all know, for example, the story of the Parthenon friezes, yeah, how they were actually, well, illegally brought to London, yeah.
They don't agree to give them back.
Yeah.
Something should be restituted, I think, because this, otherwise, it is the good name of the institution that is in danger.
Yeah.
You cannot keep a stolen object in your museum. This, I think, it should be clear. It should be clear. And even if the law was not there, it is our law. Europe made the law, and then they say, we say no. Now we are in a legal position.
Yeah. So, okay, well, any other comments, observations, well, ideas, colleagues? Okay. Then, okay, I am very happy that Cecilia was with us for 3 evenings, at least in Moscow time. Well, and of course, once again, it's very sad that we could not bring Cecilia here to Moscow, despite all our effort, Well, and I hope that we will still be able to do that when the situation changes to better. Well, sooner or later, I hope so. And thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure that all those who visited your talks, enjoyed them. I saw quite a lot of visitors on YouTube of your previous 2 lectures, and so, and you saw there were people from several other countries who joined us. So, and of course, we all wish you all the very best and ask you to keep in touch. Well, and thank you very much once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. I think that even through Zoom, we succeeded in knowing each other better now.
Absolutely.
I really look forward to come to Moscow sometime in
I
the
hope
future.
so. I hope
Let's
so.
hope. So
Yeah.
Thank you again to everybody, and especially to you, Dimitri.
Thank you very much, and keep in touch. Bye.
Goodbye then.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye.